am a stat analyst at the Iowa Department of Education. On the first slide, you have my contact information, and a lot of you, I recognize your names, and you know my email address. My phone number may be changing, and this is something that Indira knows. I accepted a different job on Wednesday. I'm going to still be with the Department of Ed, but I'm moving to a different floor and a different division. One of the requirements I put on taking a new job, though, was that I would continue to support PPICS through December 1st, so through the times that you guys would be inputting your new data. But I actually switched over to that new job a week from today, and I'm very excited about it. A lot of this information that I'm presenting today was originally presented at the 21st Century New Grantee Orientation back in July. But it's just getting this so it's recorded that everybody can hear this. And I also put in a couple of new slides about some of the questions that we had at that particular orientation. So let's see if there. PPICS, which is the way that the 21st century collects data from you, and it stands for the Profile Performance Information Collection System. And it's going to collect basic information about the 21st century programs, the characteristics of the programs, the outcomes of the programs, which tends to, as we notice, are getting more and more important at the federal level to actually know, is the 21st century programs making a difference? One of the points that I always have to point out is what the reporting interval is, and it's the summer program plus the following school year. I know that a lot of us think of the summer program as being after the school year, but try to think of it as if you would ask the kid what grade they're in. As soon as school is over with, let's say in third grade, they say, I'm a fourth grader, because they're going to be starting fourth grade next fall. So think of it in that terms. That may help for the reporting interval. So this year, the data that you are putting in will be from the summer session 2011 and school year 2011-12. The school year that you are now in will be reported in the next cycle, which will be a year from now. Most of you should have access to PPICS. That's one of the things I have to do before I get done with this job, is to go and look at and make sure that everyone has up-to-date information. And the URL for accessing PPICS is on your screen. The access is set up by me here at the state level, and what I'll set up is with the name of the grant, which is the name that's on your contract, a contact person for PPICS. This may or may not be the person in charge of the grant. It's whoever they have designated to be the person in charge of the data. It could be the person in charge of the grant, and they will just forward the emails to the data person, however they want their contact to be. And then the centers, and these are ones that I put in as per your grant agreement. And I don't tend to double check that you haven't changed those, but when I go through the system at the end of the year, you can't delete a center, you can only inactivate a center. And so if I see inactive centers, I'll ask myself, what's going on here? The login ID is emailed to the contact person. I think it changes every year. We do get a copy of it. It comes back to the contact person at the state level, which happens to be Vic Jarvis. And he actually has a filter set up so that it shoots a copy over to me. So if you ever do forget your password and you haven't changed it yourself, I can always give that to you. Or again, you can contact the PPICS people. So the first thing you do when you get your login is that you need to set up your grantee profile. And this is just the basic information about your grant and what you plan on doing. What I need from you when you set this up is a 2 to 3 sentence description of your project. You should include any significant changes in circumstances, achievements, or barriers in this profile for the year. A lot of people, when they set their initial grant, they're not going to ever change this description. Sometimes you may want to. Cedar Rapids, for instance, when they had the flooding, would have wanted to make a comment that, nationally, people may not know about that flooding in Cedar Rapids. They would want to make a point that this was one of our challenges that they put in there. The other thing that you'll do is set up your funding sources and set up your partners in connection with that. And again, the centers have already been set up by us. All of this information, though, does need to be set up before you can go in and actually fill in your annual performance report. It looks back at who are your partners, who are your centers. One of the problems I sometimes see when people can't get information into PPICS, they'll go, I add this thing and it won't add. Well, it's because it wasn't in the profile information. So when you're doing your PPICS, the first thing you should do is just quickly run through your profile and make sure that it is up to date. On your objectives, you should reference your grant application as to what the objectives that you set in your grant application. And then you need to classify them, and the list of classifications is on your screen. And I think, I'm not positive, you might be able to put multiple classifications. I'm not positive on that, but at least have one classification. You need to decide what's important to your grant and focus on some of these. There are a lot of people who are doing the improved student achievement and improved student behavior as the overwhelming top ones. But there could be people, I had recently supported the service learning project and the foster community collaboration. Now that the service learning is no longer being offered statewide, we're moving that idea into the 21st century. That might be the ones that you are working on. But that's something that you look at your grant application and classifying your objectives. On your partners, this is any organization other than the grantee who is actively contributing to the project. Put down the school district if it's appropriate. Put down the different volunteer organizations you work with. You include any subcontractors that you have, which are people you write contracts with or basically people you pay money to. So if you pay money to a particular organization, then include them as a subcontractor, as a community partner. With each partner, then, you do have to indicate how does this partner contribute to the 21st century activities. Is it with the programming? Is it with goods and materials? Is it staffing, either volunteered or paid? Is it the person who's doing the evaluation? Is it the person who's doing fundraising for you? And so this will give you an overview of the different groups that are being associated with the 21st century grants. Finally, the centers are the actual physical location for the grant-funded services. Now, a lot of our grants are through the schools, so the physical location and the grantee are the same thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And again, these are specified in your grant agreement. On the center information, this is going to be what you're going to start putting in, and these are numbers that are going to be checked when you're doing your annual performance report, comparing to what you had anticipated would be these numbers. So you need your open hours, the weekdays, how many days before, during, or after school, or the weekday evenings or weekends, how many hours per week, the number of weeks, and the days per week. Now, be very careful. Notice that's the hours per week. I don't think it was last year. I think it was 2 years ago. Someone was putting in the hours per day, and that's vastly different than the hours per week. So make sure that you're looking at what the name of it is. It's sometimes not intuitive, the information they're asking.
Hello?
And again, the categories are listed there. I know that activities can be classified by several categories, at least two. You then also list the activities by the subject area, and this is the subject area as associated with when you think of education. So you could have something that is an academic enrichment in technology or career and job training in technology. Again, the health and nutrition is something that is being pushed a little bit here. We sort of want Iowa to be a shining star in the sense of the health and nutrition, which actually I thought was interesting because it goes with the whole state goal of becoming a more healthy state. You also look at your anticipated population count, and we'll talk a little bit more about population when we actually get to the APR and the grade levels that you're going to be supporting. The prior info is basically, I think, covering someone's, I can't say the word, I guess, on the webinar, at the federal level, where people are asking, is this supplanting some previous service that was there? You just have to say, did you have these services before? If so, how long had they been going on? What sort of activities were going on? What sort of staffing was going on? This is one profile that would change once you set it up on part of the profile. The feeder schools, okay, you have your grantee. You have your centers, which are the physical location where activities are mainly taking place. Each center then is going to have a feeder school, and these are physical location buildings that are sending students to the 21st century center. A lot of times, the feeder school is just the center itself. I have a center that's located in an elementary building. That elementary building is its own feeder school. Each center must have at least one feeder school, and they won't let you advance beyond that. The other thing is that you could have a feeder school that feeds more than one center in your grant. That is possible. The centers themselves have to be unique. The feeder schools under a particular center have to be unique. But the feeder schools can repeat from one center to another, and that is a possibility. And you could see that happening, for instance, if you support multiple grades and you have most of a school going to a particular center, which might be in that school, but you may have some students in that school who have siblings in another school, and the parents want the siblings to be together. And so they may go to another center because of that. All right. At this point, are there any questions on the profile?
But what about your evaluators? Should they be under partners?
To tell you the truth, Barb, as I was going through this, that came up to me as soon as I saw that. Let me go back to the slide.
We've never included them before.
We've never included that, and I was reading that and going, oh my goodness, does that include your evaluator? And I think it should.
Okay,
you're paying your evaluator out of the 21st century funds, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that just makes it look better because it makes it, you are actually saying that part of the importance of the 21st century grant is that it's being evaluated.
Okay, I never thought of it that way before you just explained it today. So thank you.
Yeah. I pulled this list from the PPICS website, and it literally, Barb, it was as I was reading it. I think maybe it's because of the work I've been doing with you guys. I was reading that and I was going, oh my goodness, they should be including their other external evaluators here.
Okay, what about people you hire like for professional development? Becca?
Yeah, I'm thinking, sorry.
Yeah.
People you hire for professional development.
To come in and professional development for you then.
It's not programming or activity related. That one, I'm going to have to ask people on that. I don't see where it could be categorized.
Okay, I never did that one. These are just 2 new questions that just came to me as you were reading that today.
Yeah, and it did come up during the summer session. Okay. So, and I had this slide hasn't changed. And so, yeah, I think just reading through it. So, professional PD and is a partner. Okay. And I'll PPICS, and then I'll get the answer out on the wiki when I find out about that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so let's go on to what you guys really want to hear about, which is the annual performance report. This is a massive project for you or your evaluator. It collects the data from all of the 21st century grantees nationwide, and it's going to basically be looking on progress made during the preceding year to see whether you met your objectives and what sort of things that you have done in the preceding years. It won't collect data on everything you've done, and we will get to that when we're actually looking at the activities and at the attendance. It collects data that would be something that would be done nationwide, that they can then do comparisons and reports nationwide. They are looking at the data that address the GIFRA performance indicators, the Government Performance and Results Act. And again, we're being data-driven. Speaking as a data person, even, not necessarily the best way of finding out about this information, but it's a way that we can look at changes from year to year. And that itself is good. What we're going to be reporting on are what are called typical attributes. And they define the typical, but they're saying we don't want special field trips, anything that's non-recurring or anything that's episodic in that it doesn't occur with a regular schedule. They also report on what they are calling regular students. And regular students are students who have attended 30 or more days of activities. We have had some questions on what constitutes a regular student during the summer session. And I have to say this is not official because it can't be official and it's being recorded and posted. We had a particular grantee who only ran session on the summer for 29 days, which by definition, none of their students would be regular students. And we made a decision, let's just say that your regular students are 25 days or more, but report them as 30 days. This is because we looked at the number of hours the students were present, much more than what they were present during a school year day, because they were there for the full 8 hours of the day. And we just compared the hours, and the number of hours they were there was significantly more than the number of hours of a regular student. It allows us to get data on that summer program that we would otherwise not be getting. And that was the reason behind that decision. So, on your APR, like the way that I at the state delegate input to you, the grantees, you, the grantees, can delegate input to your centers. Some of you want to do that, some of you don't. They'd rather have the centers give the information to you and you put in the information on the centers. You start with your objectives, and they will go through these objectives that you put in your profile and ask to what extent did you accomplish what you intended to. And one of the things that I look at the end of the year is to see, are you getting better at meeting your objectives? And especially for those that are in the last year of their grant, did you get it done? And one of the questions that Vic should have with you, if you didn't accomplish your objectives, is, why do you think that happened? What can we do to help you out on it? It's going to ask you about your partners. Who contributed? What was their contribution? And again, it's going to look at your profile for the list of partners you have there and come back and say, here are your partners. What did they do this past year? Then the big point that they go through is the centers. And on the centers, they're going to double check the location, how long you actually operated versus how long you anticipate to operate in the profile, what activities were provided, what populations were served, and then finally the impact categories in terms of the grades and the teacher survey. Once you have the information there that is where all of the information is there submittable. You're going to see this little check mark there next to it. Now, I have to tell you, that check mark doesn't mean that you are finished with that particular budget. It means that you have the minimum. And so you may have some more information to put in there, and you can still put in information after you have checked mark it. What's going to happen at the end of the year is you'll see the little box next to that says Certified Grantee, and this, by the way, is a screenshot from my system. I will be looking at your data, and I will certify you saying, yes, this is good data. Occasionally, I will come back to the grantee and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. And this had happened earlier this year with a particular grantee who needed to get the data in early because the grant was over with, and she was no longer going to be around. And I was looking at hours of operation and asked the question, your hours of operation drastically changed from last year. How come? You know, it's not that I'm saying that's wrong. I'm saying, you know, why did it change? And I think you need to put in a comment on that. And it turned out that there had been a miscalculation. But it still had been checked marked by PPICS because they had, you know, they don't compare it to prior years. Things that aren't checked marked means that there's still missing information, and you definitely have to have. So in this case, on your screen, you can see Des Moines has their objectives where they had gone through their objectives and said to what extent they've accomplished them, but they haven't done the same, answered all the information for the centers and the partners. On your end, you can look at the report and look at your exception report, and that will give you some idea of what still needs to be entered. And then you have your APR report. And again, run that, look at it, and see what looks odd. And just give it an eyeball. Give it to someone who's not connected with your grant to say, you know, look this over. Does anything jump out at you that seems like it should be explained? And there's plenty of ways almost on every screen where you can put in comments that will explain what's going on. So the bulk of your data collection will come from the centers. On the operations, it's actually going to say, I want the actual data from your projection that you put in your profile. Same for staffing, attendance, your feeder schools, your activities, and then the two assessment categories that we have, which are the state assessment cross-year, which is going to be a little different this year, and then the teacher survey. So, staffing. You need to put in your regular staff. This is people who have a defined schedule, a defined role, and are with you on an ongoing basis. These are not individuals that come in only to work at your special or non-recurring events, your parent nights, your one-time field trips, things like that. You need to indicate whether the staff is a paid staff or volunteered staff, and this is a paid means paid by anybody, not just 21st Century. There'll be another time where you can indicate whether they're paid 100% by 21st Century grant or not. Then you need to say what category they are, and you can only put down one category for each person, even if they are multiple categories. And there's a hierarchy here. So you would say, okay, if you have someone who is a parent and a school day teacher, you would count them as a school day teacher, not a parent. So you count in the top category first, working your way down, which is sort of interesting. Well, I guess, okay, so let's say that, you know, would we ever have someone in the other? But yeah, you could. I could see where you would have senior citizens who are not parents of any of your students and aren't in college, and so I could see that happening. Oh no, senior citizens going to other community members. I have no idea who other would be. Have any of you put anyone in other for your staffing? I don't think anyone else has any idea either. All right, attendance. you're going to put in your number of your students and the number of adults. Now, this is one place where you'll count all attendees. And I think this is all student attendees. And then you also will say your regular student attendees, which is defined as the 30 days or more. And again, I've had the discussion of what constitutes a regular student attendee. For adults, these are adults that have ongoing and sustained participation, so not just adults that will come to your parent night. They're thinking in terms of this of people, for instance, who are taking a GED class with you, though they can also take that through the community college, a resume writing class that they come several times. They're looking at things where there is active participation, not just I attend, all right? You're going to have to put this in whether they are both school and summer and school year, or if they're only in the summer or only in the school year. So you need to be tracking when they are coming. You put in their racial or ethnic group, and you'll need to indicate whether it's a regular student or all students. On the racial and ethnic, you can do duplicates on that, and so the totals there won't necessarily be the total of your students. Same for gender, same for whether they have limited English proficiency. Are they eligible for reduced price lunches? Do they have special needs or develop disabilities? And then the grade levels for them. And again, this is one of the advantages of having the summer and school year all be together, because the grade level should be the same the whole way through your reporting period. And I'm not sure, never mind, I'll hit that later. Feeder schools, you've already listed your feeder schools in your profile. You basically say an estimated percentage of center participants, and should add up to 100%. You probably will get, if it's not close to 100%, you'll get not be able to finish up that part. On your activities, again, look at the definition of PPICS, but it's a discrete program offered on a defined schedule. Again, they're not one-off things. A special field trip does not count as activity unless you're having a series of field trips that have a focus to them. Then you could list that as an activity and give a name to it. They can be targeted either to the students or the adult family members of your participants. The activity type will be pulled from the profile. It will ask if you have targeted a student population with this particular activity. For instance, for some academic work, you're targeting the people who are not at their grade level. You're targeting the limited English proficiency people. You're targeting truants. You're targeting special needs. And then if it's not any of those, then you'll say that, no, this is for all our students. We're not targeting any particular subpopulation of our students. The activity subject area, again, this is going to be something that would be pulled in from the profile. And then the time provided. And because it was a program that was offered on a defined schedule, you would say, how many weeks, how many days per week, how many hours per day. And again, this gets a little odd because remember earlier where we're talking about the centers open, it was hours per week. This is down to hours per day. And then finally, the number of participants that participated in this program. Then we get to the one that you guys all love, and this is reporting on proficiency categories. And one of the two that we've chosen is called the state assessment cross-year. And we have you reporting on your regular attendees. Now, earlier we had said regular attendees were 30 days or more. For the proficiency reporting, we've also now divided that down into how regular are your regular attendees. So are they 30 to 59 days, 60 to 89 days, or 90 plus days? Now, I have to say a little caveat to this. This is new this year that we actually separated out into the attendance categories. There may be some grantees who did not collect this information last year, and I completely understand that. What we're asking those grantees to do is just report everyone as a 30 to 59 day regular attendee. you have to have the state assessment scores for last year and this year for math or reading or both. And these are the scores that are from the state assessment exam. Now, before this year, what we're asking is from the state assessment to use the national percentile rank score, which ranks as high, an intermediate, or a low, depending on what that national percentile rank was. This year, because we switched tests, we're using the national standard score, which means you have to know when the test was taken. And I gave a URL there. It'll take you to a little chart that will be on the next slide that will say how they're ranking the non-proficient, the proficient, and the advanced, which correlates to our low, intermediate, and high. What we're looking at, I realize we're comparing apples and oranges, sort of, but what we look at is not individual scores. We look at changes in proficiency level. So what you should do is for the ones before last year's score is get what their proficiency level was, the high, the intermediate, low. Then get it for this year and look at the number of people who changed. Vic and I talked about this. For us, it was much more important that we actually report some data rather than to say, hey, we switched tests, so we can't really compare apples and oranges. Well, the previous test, if they scored intermediate, it was more likely that they're going to score intermediate this year. The boundaries may be a little bit blurry, but at least we're getting some data. For the national standard score, though, you're going to have a chart when you go to that URL that looks like this. And so you not only have to know what grade they're in, you have to know when the test was given and get that information from your school districts. If you cannot get this information from your your attendees, and this is only your regular attendees, and I can understand that that's happening if you are especially not connected with the school district. Get the information to me in terms of the students' names, grades, and schools, and I can pull up the information to you. I can't send the scores back to you because of the FERPA rules, but I can send back the number of what categories have changed for you, and that is possible to send it back. I've also heard from some grantees who basically are being told by their schools, this isn't in our job description to give you this data, even though most of you have in your contracts with the school said that it's in the job description. Again, get the information to me and I can get it back to you. And to me, that's the best solution. So, any questions on that before we go off of that slide? Because this is the big change from last year. Okay, no. Yeah, I'm not doing the educator thing, which says you're supposed to wait a full 30 seconds. Sorry, you can ask the questions at the end. The other thing that we have for collecting evaluation data is the teacher survey. And you have me to blame for the teacher survey. Some of you may remember the person before Vic, which I can't even think of his name now. That's scary. Chris was before Vic. Who was before? Joe Harity. Joe Harity, yeah. I know. It's like I have this little thing he gave me right up here, and it's pointing down to this name on here, Joe Harity. I convinced him because we didn't have any data that was being collected on our early elementary students because they don't take these tests until second or third grade, and it was basically we had on our earliest students, which we had a lot of, no information at all. And so I convinced them to use this teacher survey. This is something that if you haven't done this by now, it's probably too late. This is something that should be administered at the end of the year to school day teacher for your students, again, who are regular attendees. You might want to actually give a heads up to your school day teachers now at this time for next year's PPICS reporting, saying, hey, at the end of the year, I'm going to want you to report on the 21st century students. You don't know who yet is going to be a regular attendee, but I'm going to be looking at this information, and I'm going to want to know how their behavior changed from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. By giving a heads up to your teachers now, they're going to say, oh, yeah, I should be looking at Denise, and is she behaving well in class? Again, what's likely with most of us is that we think of the most recent behavior, and yes, she's behaving wonderfully. Do I remember that she wasn't paying attention at the beginning of the year? You know, it's nice to give a heads up to your teachers. And again, then you would report this in the categories. If you haven't done the attendance categories, report them all in the 30 to 59-day range. Okay. Any questions on teacher survey or any comments on that?
Becca? 30-plus students for the teacher surveys together. So there's no way to divide that apart now. So should we have all the other ones named, the 30 to 59 in the other section?
So you know on your students, okay, what their attendance levels were, but when you gave it to the teachers, you didn't split it out, is what you're saying, right?
When we compiled it together, we took, we take the names off. We don't know who, we give them certain ones for the kids, but we don't have their names on the data.
Yeah.
So we couldn't split it now.
Yeah, and if that happens, again, this is a learning time. Put them all into the 30 to 59. For next year, try to figure out if there's a way that you can either, give them, that'd be pain in the neck for the teacher, but 3 separate surveys maybe, one for each category, or somehow be able to tie the responses from a particular survey back to a student so that you can divide in your end. But for now, yeah, just stick them in 30 to 59. You did the absolutely best thing you could have at the time.
Okay, so then do we need to match the 30 to 59 on the other part, the test scores too then? So it matches? Is that important?
I don't know, because I'm sitting here going, will PPICS throw up an exception because in your attendance you said you had so many 30 to 59?
So maybe we should do them all 30 to 59 this year.
Yeah, I have a feeling that PPICS will hit an exception on you for that.
Let's do that. Let's do them all 30 to 59.
Yeah.
Because they're already combined.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can't break them up. So
I think we're going to
agree
kick
with that.
it out otherwise.
Yeah, and I do, and we'll hit that on the next slide. This is a new slide that I added in from the
Becca?
before we go on, another question?
Yeah, this is Roy Hansen in Dubuque. Hey, I've got a question on the teacher surveys. As we just, I received the teacher surveys about a month ago that were completed last spring from our 2 schools that are participating, and one had filled out one for all high-level participating students, and the other school, for some reason, they did not get 5 or 6 of the students completed the teacher survey. So do we just have, is there any suggestions? That way.
You cover it that way, yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Becca.
Sure. Any other questions on the evaluation categories? Okay, let's go on to the end. What's going to happen is there's going to be exceptions that will show up with your data. PPICS will compare your data with what they call typical numbers. Don't ask me how they got their typical numbers. I did find out what the typical numbers were, though. So for operations, they're going to look at the school year hours, before school, during school, after school, weekend hours, or the total school year hours. Again, this is per week. The summer hours, the weekday hours, evening hours, weekend hours, and again, the total summer hours. If you are more than what these numbers are, they're going to throw an exception and ask you why, saying, it doesn't match. It doesn't mean that it's quote-unquote wrong. It just means that it's something to look at. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to put in a comment, and there's a comment on the, for instance, the hours page, as to why this is not this is more than what they call the maximum typical number. Again, it's a typical number. And there could be a very good reason. We just want to know what it is. Where a lot of times this happens is with staffing, and especially with the volunteer staff, where the center, the grant will have a much larger number of volunteer staff than what is a typical. Explain that, for instance, your center is, your grantee is located in the same town as a university, and you have regular volunteers. Remember, these all have to be regular people that come that volunteer as part of a class, and this is why your numbers are so high. You just have to explain why. Activities, they're going to look at the total activities hours of the ones that you've listed, which are your regular, on a schedule program activities, and if it's less than half your total hours, you just need to explain why. This can often happen, I think, during the summer, where you do a lot of special things during the summer that don't count as an activity. Just explain why. For grades and state assessments, and, well, not grades because we're not doing it, for state assessments and the teacher survey, you had regular attendees but reported no data. This one you're really going to have to convince me, because state assessments, you can always get the data from me. Teacher survey, you could basically say, the survey came out at a time when the teachers were overwhelmed and no teacher returned the survey. This is how we plan to correct it next year. And so it's going to just ask you to put in comments explaining the situation. Those comments are something I look at the end of the year, going, yep, that makes sense, and then I also save all the comments and give them over to Vic. So, any questions that you have? The best way to get a hold of me is email. I'm not a particular fan of the phone unless we have a recurring relationship, like I do with Barb, that we go onto the phone to answer the question. Your data is due November 1st, but I want you to know that that is flexible. That's a date that I put in to give me a month to look at the data, because our state report is due December 10th. So if it happens, okay, heaven forbid, someone's in a car accident on October 25th, and there's no way you're going to make the November 1st deadline, just let me know. And you'll still be able to put in the data. I just have to know so that I know not to be checking your particular grantee at that time. I'm hoping to be done well in advance of December 10th, but up until December 10th, I may be emailing or contacting whoever is your contact on the PPICS with questions on your data. So, now, are there any questions? Your last chance at me.
Becca, it's Lynn in Stern Lake.
Yeah.
I have a volunteer question.
Okay.
We do have a university in town, and I have a couple different partnerships with different classrooms. One of them, they require their students to come in and do 10 hours over the course of the semester. And there's probably 20 kids. Would those be regular, or would you not consider that regular because they're done after 10 hours and I may never see them again?
No, because they don't have an hour determination for the regular, do they? Do they come in at particular? It's the class.
Each student sets up their own schedule with me. Some of them come in 2 days a week. Some of them come in 1 day a week. Some of them come in.
I call that, then those are counted as volunteers because they have a regular schedule. Okay. I would count them as your volunteers. Yes.
Okay.
Becca, this is Roy Hanson again in Dubuque. I have a question back to the activity numbers. And you talked earlier about, if you had a separate, isolated field trip, you don't count that as an activity. But if you had a series of related field trips, that were all connected to a theme, that they could be counted. Is there like a minimum number of activities associated with that?
They don't give it. It's whether you can justify it in your head. And look, what I would say is look at the definition of what an activity is
Okay.
and say, can I justify it? And basically, it's something that you would say is something that's a recurring thing that's on your calendar.
Right. Like
What
we
field
have
trips?
we have a series of recurring events, let's say, to a nature center that's located in Dubuque. And each time they go to the nature center, there might be a different topic of study with the naturalist. But it's still, like I said, in my mind, connected. And I just want to clarify that
Yeah.
you think that too.
And to me, that's considered an activity. What about, okay, group speak? You know, does this sound like an activity to everybody else?
Okay. All right. That makes sense to me. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, if my phone number changes, and I have a feeling that it will, because I'm moving to a completely different floor, I will put that on the wiki so that you guys have access to it, and of course it would be in any replies to the emails that you would send me. I am here for you, and no question is dumb, because I think we all learned, just as Barb demonstrated when we were going through this slide earlier, something that we'd all had said earlier and never considered, that, for instance, evaluators